Some days feel so heavy that even hope sounds unrealistic. You tell yourself love is for other people, not for someone who's been tired for this long. But everything shifted for me because of one quiet morning in Denmark, and one cup of coffee that tasted strangely like hope. This video is the story of how a small moment, with the right person, can make your heart remember what it tried so hard to forget. A cup that started it all. There's something oddly dramatic about how a normal morning can turn into the kind of memory your heart refuses to delete. Picture this. Cold Danish air brushing against your face, the kind that makes your thoughts feel sharper than they should. I stepped into that little Copenhagen cafe just to warm my hands, not expecting anything to warm my life. Yet the moment the door closed behind me, something in the air felt different, like the universe had quietly adjusted one tiny dial without asking for permission. The place smelled like fresh espresso and a hint of caramel, the kind of scent that makes your shoulders drop and your guard loosen even if you didn't plan on it. I remember shaking the snow off my jacket, awkwardly scanning the room for an empty seat, and then my eyes paused. Not because I saw someone perfect, but because my heart did this strange quiet flip, like it whispered, "Oh, there you are." It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't cinematic. It was softer, the kind of softness you only notice when you've been tired for a long time. They were sitting by the window, light falling across their hair like a spotlight that wasn't trying too hard. Just a person reading a book, sipping a drink. Simple. Ordinary. But sometimes the most ordinary scene hits you right where your hope has been sleeping. And in that instant I felt something I hadn't felt in months. A tiny spark of curiosity, mixed with the terrifying thought that maybe, just maybe, my heart wasn't as closed as I pretended it was. I ordered a coffee, the same drink I always get, but when I took the first sip it somehow tasted different. Not sweeter, not stronger, but warmer. As if my chest was finally remembering what gentle felt like. That tiny warmth traveled through me, melting the frozen parts of my confidence, the ones I had wrapped up tightly after too many disappointments. It didn't fix anything, didn't solve my life, but it reminded me that something in me was still alive enough to be moved. I sat there longer than I should have, pretending to check messages while secretly stealing small glances toward the window. Not in a creepy way. More like trying to figure out why a complete stranger suddenly made the room feel less empty. I didn't speak to them yet. I didn't even smile. But in that quiet morning, surrounded by soft light and the hum of Danish conversations, I felt the beginning of something subtle and undefinable. A cup of coffee shouldn't have that much power. And yet that day it did. The awkward first conversation. Let me tell you something slightly embarrassing. Destiny has a sense of humor, and mine apparently enjoys watching me panic in public. Because the first time we actually spoke, oh, it was a masterpiece of awkwardness. The kind of moment where your brain decides to disconnect from your mouth just to see what happens. I wasn't planning to talk to them at all, truly. I was planning to sip my coffee, look mysterious, and quietly leave before my courage expired. But life, as usual, had other plans. They stood up to grab a napkin, and for one shocking second our eyes met. Not the polite kind where two strangers accidentally lock eyes and instantly look away. No. This one lingered just long enough for my heart to knock on my ribs like it was trying to escape. And then they smiled. A small, warm, gentle smile, The type that says, I see you, without making it weird. My brain, overwhelmed, responded by doing absolutely nothing. 0. Blank screen. System error. They walked closer, probably just passing by, but to me it felt like the entire cafe tilted in their direction. And then they said something simple, too simple honestly. Beautiful weather today, isn't it? Now, a normal person would respond with something equally simple like yes, or it really is. But no. My mouth, in a desperate attempt to participate, blurted out, yes, weather, very temperature. Temperature that I said temperature to a human being I found attractive. There was a moment of silence, a tiny pause in the universe. My soul left my body, observed the situation, and whispered, wow, really? That's what we're going with? But instead of laughing, they just raised an eyebrow playfully and said, I guess that's one way to put it. Their tone was light, teasing in the softest way, as if they were gently telling me I was adorable and not malfunctioning like a confused toaster. I tried again, this time managing an actual sentence. Sorry, I'm not from here. They smiled, a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes, and replied, that's okay. I'm not judging. Copenhagen can make anyone lose their words. Lose their words. If only they knew how much I was losing at that moment, words, logic, dignity. But something unexpected happened next. Instead of running away from the awkwardness, they stayed in it with me. We talked for a few minutes, halting sentences, shy laughs, tiny pauses, but there was a softness in the air, like the awkwardness itself was part of the charm. The conversation wasn't smooth, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty is far more magnetic than perfection. When they eventually went back to their seat, my heart was still racing, but not from panic anymore. From possibility. And that's the wild thing about moments like these. Sometimes your first impression is messy, chaotic, slightly ridiculous, and still exactly right. Lost in feelings, lost in words. There's a strange kind of chaos that happens when your feelings grow faster than your vocabulary. You'd think emotions would make you more articulate, but no, they turn your brain into mashed potatoes and your sentences into falling Jenga blocks. The days after our first conversation, I kept running into them at the cafe, on the same street corner, even once at the supermarket when I was buying instant noodles and pretending that counted as cooking. Every time I felt something quietly expanding inside my chest and shrinking inside my throat. It wasn't fear of the language. It was fear of the meaning behind the words. Because the more I liked them, the more terrified I became of saying anything at all. The human brain is funny that way. The moment you desperately want something to go well, your nervous system shows up with a bucket of chaos and says, let me just sabotage everything real quick. Science actually has a name for this. It's called cognitive interference, when strong emotions overwhelm your working memory, making it harder to retrieve even the simplest words. Basically, your brain gets so busy screaming "Don't mess this up" that it forgets how to function. And trust me, mine was holding a full-scale protest point one afternoon. We ended up taking a walk along the lakes in Copenhagen. The air was crisp, the water calm, the scenery stunning, and I was internally combusting. They asked me about my life back home, and I swear I could feel my heartbeat physically shaking the vocabulary out of my mouth. I started a sentence, stopped halfway, restarted, apologized, laughed awkwardly. a whole symphony of chaos. And each time I stumbled, they just waited patiently, never rushing me, never looking away. But that only made everything worse because patience is disarming. Kindness is destabilizing. And gentleness from someone you like? That's emotional turbulence at level 500. What made it harder was the vulnerability of it all. When you like someone, every word becomes a confession even when it's not. A simple sentence like, "I like walking here," suddenly feels like you're really saying, "Please don't disappear from my life." And the fear of miscommunication becomes the fear of losing something before it even begins. There was one moment I'll never forget. I tried to tell them that I enjoyed spending time together, but the sentence collapsed halfway, and all I managed to say was, "I like this." They tilted their heads slightly, smiled softly, and answered, "Me too." 2 words. Quiet, warm, steady enough to calm the hurricane inside me. And that's when it hit me. Maybe they didn't need perfect sentences. Maybe they understood the language behind the pauses, the hesitations, the nervous laughter. Some people don't listen to your grammar, they listen to your heart trying its best. And in those days my heart was trying so hard. The Denmark days together. There's a certain magic in Denmark that doesn't show up on postcards. It's not the castles or the canals or the perfect Scandinavian architecture. It's the quiet moments, the tiny, almost invisible details that sneak into your memory and refuse to leave. And somehow, every one of those moments started including them. It wasn't planned. Nothing dramatic happened. It just unfolded like the universe was nudging us gently closer without making a big announcement about it. We started spending more time together, slowly at first, like 2 people carefully testing the water before stepping in. A short walk turned into a long one. A quick coffee became a 2-hour conversation. A random evening message transformed into a steady rhythm of, "Are you free tomorrow?" And every single time I said yes faster than my mind could pretend to be chill. Copenhagen has this way of making even ordinary days feel poetic. The bicycles gliding past, the faint smell of cinnamon rolls drifting from a bakery, the soft stretch of golden hour over the old buildings. Everything felt warmer when they were next to me. One afternoon we sat by the Nyhavn harbor, legs dangling above the water, watching boats drift by as if time had slowed down just for us. They talked about their childhood. I told them about my first winter abroad. And while the wind was cold enough to sting our cheeks, the conversation filled that space between us with something quietly electric. Not loud, not overwhelming, just alive. There's this odd thing your mind does when you start liking someone deeply. It takes snapshots, tiny mental photographs of how they laugh with their heads slightly tilted, how they push their hair behind their ear when the wind gets in the way, how their eyes brighten just a little when they talk about something they love. I kept collecting these snapshots without meaning to. My brain was basically running a secret Pinterest board titled, "Reasons Why You're Falling for Them." And yet the best moments were the simplest ones. Walking through narrow streets with no destination, sharing a pastry and pretending we weren't both reaching for the same bite, listening to them talk about life while I tried and failed. Not to stare too much. One evening stands out more than the rest. We were sitting by the King's Garden, the sky turning soft pink. They were talking about something I can't even remember now, because I was too busy noticing the warmth in their voice, the sincerity in their eyes. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt safe, not because life was perfect, but because someone felt close enough to breathe around. Love doesn't arrive like a storm. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper, one shared moment at a time. And Denmark, in all its calm and quiet beauty, became the backdrop of a story my heart didn't see coming, but needed more than I realized. The storm before the confession. There's a strange rule the universe seems to follow. Right when everything feels calm, it throws you into emotional turbulence just to check if you're paying attention. And that storm always arrives quietly at first. A small thought, a tiny doubt, a whisper in your mind saying, "What if you're the only one feeling this?" I tried to ignore it. I tried to keep enjoying the soft, easy rhythm we had found together. But feelings don't care about your plans. They arrive when they want and demand to be heard. It all started on a chilly evening. The kind where the sky turns dark earlier than you expect, and your mood follows. We were supposed to meet at the cafe, our cafe, but they texted me last minute saying they were too busy to come. It was a simple message, polite and harmless, but my overthinking brain took it as a personal invitation to fall apart. Suddenly every moment replayed in my head with a different tone. Were they being nice because they genuinely cared? Or just being friendly? Had I misread everything? Did they sense my feelings and start pulling away? It's ridiculous how fast your mind can create a disaster movie starring you. One minute you're calm, the next you're imagining losing something that wasn't even yours yet. I walked around the city that night, not really seeing anything. Just thinking, overthinking, doubting. Copenhagen streets, usually comforting, suddenly felt too wide, too cold, too empty. Even the Christmas lights strung across the buildings felt like they were mocking how warm I had been just days earlier. And beneath all the fear, one truth kept haunting me. I liked them too much to pretend I didn't. The emotional storm got louder. Questions hit like freezing wind. Should I confess? Should I stay quiet? If I speak, I might lose them. If I don't speak, I might lose myself. At some point, I stopped walking and stood by the water near the bridge at Dronning Louise's Bro, watching the reflection ripple beneath the city lights. It felt symbolic, cliché. Even my heart was exactly like that reflection. Shaky, uncertain, beautiful in a messy way. I realized then that the fear wasn't about rejection. It was about vulnerability, about being seen, about handing someone your heart and trusting they wouldn't drop it. That night I made a decision, not because I was brave, but because pretending was starting to hurt more than the truth ever could. If they didn't feel the same, at least I'd know. At least I'd be honest. At least I wouldn't lose something precious just because I was afraid to name it. And so I promised myself, the next time we met I would tell them. Not perfectly, not poetically, just truthfully, even if my voice shook. The storm didn't disappear after that decision, but it softened like a reminder that clarity doesn't always calm you. Sometimes it prepares you. The confession at the cafe. The next morning felt heavier than usual, not because of the weather. Copenhagen's sky was a pale, soft gray, but because I carried a storm inside me that refused to quiet down. I told myself over and over, keep it simple. Just say it. Don't overthink. But as soon as I walked into our cafe, My brain decided that it was a perfect time for rebellion. My palms were sweating, my heart was doing that ridiculous double-time thing, and every sentence I had practiced in my head evaporated instantly. They were already there, sitting at our usual table by the window, casually reading a book. I tried to look calm, like this was just another morning, but I could feel my stomach doing somersaults. I ordered my coffee, tried to act normal, and sat down. For a moment we just looked at each other. The kind of quiet that speaks louder than words. And then I realized there was no perfect way to start. So I jumped, or at least I stumbled into the jump. I wanted to tell you something. I started, voice shaking despite my best efforts. I cleared my throat. I really enjoy spending time with you. More than just friends. My words sounded clunky, raw, exposed, but it was all I could manage. Every syllable felt like it carried my heart on its back. They looked up from their book. A pause. Not awkward, but attentive. I think in that pause my soul screamed, "Please don't laugh. Please don't walk away." My confidence was zero, but something about the way they held my gaze made me dare to continue. I know it's sudden and maybe it's messy, but I like you. A lot. Silence, soft like the warm hum of the cafe. And then the faintest smile. Their lips curved slowly. A mix of amusement and affection that made me exhale in relief. I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I'm glad you told me," they said quietly, leaning back in their chair. "I like you too. I just wasn't sure if you felt the same." Relief washed over me in waves so strong I almost spilled my coffee. But even stronger than relief was the simple, grounding truth. Honesty had won over fear. The words didn't have to be perfect. The timing didn't have to be flawless. All that mattered was the courage to speak them. And in that small sunlit cafe, the messy truth felt more beautiful than any perfectly planned love story. We spent the rest of the morning talking, laughing, and planning our next adventure. Not as distant strangers or cautious friends, but as two people quietly stepping into something real. And though nothing in the world had changed except the clarity of what we felt, everything felt brighter, softer. Possibility, it turns out, has a taste, and in that moment it tasted exactly like hope, and like the first sip of a cup of coffee that would never be ordinary again. The unexpected answer. I wasn't prepared for the calmness of their response. I had imagined dramatic reactions, surprise, laughter, even a slight shock, but instead they just smiled. That same warm, steady smile that had quietly drawn me in from the start. "I like you too," they said, and the words weren't rushed or forced. They landed gently, like sunlight breaking through a cloudy morning, and somehow my chest that had been tight with fear suddenly felt expansive, free. It was the kind of answer you hope for but don't expect. The kind that makes every anxious moment worth it. We talked for a long while, not needing grand gestures or rehearsed sentences. Just conversation that flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and shared glances. For the first time, I realized that love didn't always arrive in fireworks. Sometimes it came quietly, patiently, like it had been waiting for the exact right moment, letting you discover it on your own terms. That calmness in their response carried a lesson I didn't know I needed. Honesty is magnetic, but vulnerability is transformative. And when you mix the two, the result feels almost magical. The cafe became our little sanctuary, a place where language mistakes didn't matter, where imperfect sentences were met with understanding instead of judgment. Every time we revisited that spot, it reminded me how powerful it is to take risks with your heart. There's a strange courage in allowing yourself to be seen, fully and unfiltered. I realized then that the fear of rejection is usually louder in our heads than in reality. Often the other person is quietly hoping you'll show your true feelings, just as much as you're hoping they will understand. We walked out of the cafe hand in hand, and the streets of Copenhagen felt different, softer, brighter, alive in ways they hadn't been before. Every small detail, from the cobblestones beneath our feet to the muted hum of bicycles passing by, seemed to celebrate the moment we finally acknowledged what had been building quietly between us. I understood then that the unexpected answer, the one that surprises you with its simplicity and honesty, can change the course of your heart far more than any perfectly planned declaration ever could. That day taught me something crucial. Sometimes the love we think is impossible, messy, or inconvenient is waiting patiently for our courage to match its timing. And when that alignment finally happens, it doesn't roar. It whispers, it reassures, it quietly reshapes your world. The lesson wasn't just about love. It was about trusting life, trusting moments, and most importantly, trusting myself to take that leap, even when it felt terrifying. Hope in every simple moment. Looking back, it's almost funny how everything began with something so ordinary. A cup of coffee in a quiet Danish cafe. Who would have thought that one small, seemingly insignificant action could spark a chain of events that changed everything? Yet that's the beauty of life. The tiniest moments often carry the greatest weight. That first sip, that fleeting glance, the warmth of their smile, they weren't grand gestures, but they were enough to remind me that hope exists, even when your heart has been bruised or cautious for too long. After that morning, everything felt softer and more alive. We wandered through the streets of Copenhagen, talked about dreams and fears, and laughed at small, silly things that only mattered to us. Every shared smile, every quiet conversation, every awkward yet meaningful silence became a thread weaving our story together. I realized that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real, and moments don't have to be extraordinary to leave a mark. The magic is often in the ordinary, in the courage to show up and in the choice to stay present. There were times I doubted myself, moments I thought it was too soon, too messy, too risky. But those doubts didn't stop me, they shaped me. They made me realize that vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's a bridge. And sometimes taking even the smallest step across that bridge can transform everything. From awkward conversations to shy smiles, each moment taught me patience, courage, and the quiet strength of sincerity. It reminded me that the heart, even when fragile, has a remarkable ability to heal, adapt, and leap forward. Now, whenever I think about that cup of coffee, I don't just remember the taste. I remember the hope it carried, the courage it inspired, and the connection it nurtured. Life often whispers its most important lessons in the smallest packages. A warm beverage, a shared glance, a kind word, a gentle smile. And when you notice these moments, when you choose to embrace them fully, they can illuminate paths you never imagined. So, here's the takeaway. Sometimes hope isn't a grand gesture. Sometimes it's a quiet, simple moment that convinces your heart to try again, to believe, to love. And if you let it, even the tiniest spark can set your world on fire. In the gentlest, most beautiful way.